I came home from work that evening expecting the usual, my wife, Elizabeth, handling things around the house while I unwound from the day. The routine was predictable. I'd get in, toss my keys on the counter, grab a drink, and settle into the comfort of home. But that night, something felt different the moment I stepped inside. Laughter and chatter spilled from the living room, a little more animated than usual. Elizabeth had some of her friends over, which wasn't out of the ordinary, but the energy in the room had an edge to it. I kicked off my shoes, washed my hands, and decided to join them for a bit, curiosity pulling me in. I figured I'd grab a coffee and just listen. Sometimes their conversations were more entertaining than any action movie I could put on. They were reminiscing about their younger days, talking about how great it would be to bring back that carefree spirit. A simple night out, just like the old times. The idea got everyone excited, and for a while, it was just harmless fun, until one of Elizabeth's friends decided to throw in a curveball. "We should do something different," she said, leaning in like she was about to drop some big secret. The women paused, intrigued. I did too, but I kept my expression neutral, pretending to focus on my coffee. And then she said it. "What if we made it a swingers party?" Silence. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room for a second. Everyone exchanged glances, processing what they had just heard. Then, almost as if to soften the impact, she added, "Of course, we wouldn't have to actually swap partners if we didn't want to. It could just be a fun, open experience." Laughter broke out again, though it felt a little forced. Some of the women joked that they'd need way more alcohol to even consider such a thing. But no one outright rejected the idea. They tossed it around for a while, testing the waters, gauging each other's reactions. It wasn't something they'd ever done before, but there was a strange curiosity in the air. Eventually, the conversation shifted back to something tamer, just a regular night out at a bar. The whole swingers idea was left hanging, not exactly dismissed, but not fully embraced either. It was clear they weren't ready to go there yet. I kept my mouth shut the entire time, just taking it all in. It was interesting to watch the dynamic unfold. My wife didn't seem shocked or put off by the suggestion. If anything, she seemed amused. Maybe even thoughtful. As the evening wrapped up and Elizabeth's friends headed out, I chalked it up as just another weird, unexpected moment. Nothing to lose sleep over. At least, that's what I told myself. But later that night, just as I was about to drift off, Elizabeth turned to me in bed, her voice cutting through the silence. "So, would you ever consider it?" I blinked, not sure if I had actually heard her correctly. "Consider what?" "You know," she said, her tone casual, but her eyes locked on mine. "What my friend suggested." She was serious, wide awake and waiting for an answer. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face, trying to shake off the exhaustion. "Honestly, no. It's not really my thing. The idea of swapping partners just doesn't sit right with me. Especially with people we know." She didn't look surprised, but she pressed on. "But what if we didn't swap? What if we just went?" I narrowed my eyes at her. "You mean just be there, but not do anything?" She nodded, watching me closely. I thought about it for a second, then smirked. "I've been naked in front of my friends plenty of times. Locker rooms, camping trips, you name it. So no, that part doesn't bother me. But I don't know, Liz. The whole setup just feels weird." She studied me for a moment, processing my response. Then she gave a small, knowing smile. "All right. Good to know." And that was it. She rolled over, seemingly satisfied. But I had a feeling that conversation wasn't over. Not really. Something told me this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up thinking the conversation from last night was just a passing curiosity, something Elizabeth would eventually brush off. But I was wrong. As I was sipping my coffee, she casually mentioned she was going to meet up with her friend, the same one who had suggested the whole swingers idea. "We're just talking about the party," she said, smiling. "Nothing crazy." I raised an eyebrow. "The party? I thought you guys decided on a regular night out." She shrugged, grabbing her purse. "We're just throwing some ideas around. And besides, her boyfriend is coming too. I want to see what he's like. You know, make sure he's a good guy. She has terrible taste in men." I wasn't exactly thrilled about her suddenly taking the reins on this, but I let it slide. After all, she was just planning a party. Hours later, she came back home, and it was immediately obvious she had been drinking. She was in a good mood, all giggly and flushed. I asked her how the meetup went, and she told me they had been brainstorming ideas. "Nothing's set in stone yet," she said. "But we might be able to get everything we need for free." Her boyfriend owns a sex shop. I nearly choked on my drink. "Eh, what?" She laughed. "Yeah, apparently, he's got connections. He even brought out some of the bigger stuff to show us." I frowned. "Bigger stuff?" She smirked. "Like, ridiculously oversized toys. I mean, I can't imagine anyone actually using them, but it was hilarious to see everyone's reactions." I stared at her, trying to process the fact that my wife had just spent her afternoon drinking with a guy who sells sex toys for a living. And now she was considering taking free supplies from him for this so-called party. "Tell me you're not actually planning to bring any of that stuff home," I said, only half joking. She grinned. "Oh, come on, it would be funny. Just for the shock factor." I shook my head. "Yeah, no. That thing would end up collecting dust in some closet." She giggled. "Probably." Despite my reservations, I let it go. She was clearly enjoying herself, and I didn't want to kill the vibe. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this party was starting to turn into something a lot bigger than just a casual gathering. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. A few days later, Elizabeth brought up another idea. "We should have a barbecue," she said. "A barbecue?" I asked, confused. "Yeah, to finalize the plans. Get everyone together, figure out the details." It sounded innocent enough, but something about the way she was pushing this made me uneasy. She wasn't just organizing a get-together, she was making sure this happened. Still, I played along. I fired up the grill, grabbed some steaks, and got everything ready. That night, everyone started arriving, laughing and chatting like it was any other gathering. But the moment her friend's boyfriend showed up, I felt an immediate sense of unease. I don't usually judge people based on appearances, but this guy had a vibe that didn't sit right with me. He was covered in piercings and tattoos. Not the problem, but there was something in his eyes, a kind of arrogance, like he was always sizing people up. And the way he carried himself, it was like he thought he owned the room. I kept an eye on him as the night went on. And sure enough, I wasn't imagining things. He wasn't talking to the men at all. Instead, he was bouncing from woman to woman, laughing a little too much, leaning in a little too close. I saw the way he was looking at them, especially Elizabeth. At one point, I walked over to Elizabeth's friend and asked, "Hey, does it bother you that your boyfriend is, all over the other women?" She shrugged. "Not really. We have an open relationship." That caught me off guard. "Seriously?" She just smiled. "Yeah. It works for us." I nodded, pretending I understood, but internally, I was even more on edge. This guy wasn't just being friendly, he was testing boundaries. And then I saw him talking to Elizabeth. I wasn't about to stand there and watch some dude I barely knew charm my wife right in front of me. So, I walked over, acting casual. As I got closer, I caught part of their conversation. They were laughing about those ridiculous oversized toys from his shop. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there and listened. Then, without missing a beat, I jumped into the conversation, steering it in a completely different direction. He wasn't happy about it. I could see the irritation flash across his face, but he didn't say anything. After a minute or two, he excused himself and walked off. Good. The rest of the night went smoothly, and when Elizabeth finally made her little announcement about the party, most people seemed on board. No one outright rejected it. I didn't say much, I was still processing everything. But I knew one thing for sure. That guy. He was trouble. And I wasn't going to ignore it. The night after the barbecue, Elizabeth and I were winding down in the living room when I decided to bring something up that had been nagging at me. I started, keeping my voice casual, "I don't think your friend's relationship is going to last very long." Elizabeth glanced at me, mildly interested. "Oh, and why's that?" I leaned back in my chair, debating how much to say. "Because her boyfriend spent the whole night flirting with every woman there, including you." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. He's just friendly. I shook my head. No. Friendly is making conversation. This guy was doing everything except physically draping himself over you. Elizabeth didn't answer right away. Instead, she gave me this amused look, like she knew something I didn't. And then she said, well, I hate to break it to you, but he's only around for two things, money and sex. That's it. My friend knows that. It's kind of their deal. I blinked. Wait, what? She shrugged. Yeah, apparently, she's fine with it. She needs the money from his shop, and well, let's just say he keeps her entertained. That's why she doesn't care if he flirts. I sat there for a moment, trying to wrap my head around that. So, it's basically a transaction? Pretty much, Elizabeth said, sipping her wine like it was no big deal. That was all I needed to hear. I'd already felt uneasy about this guy, but now I knew for sure, he had no boundaries. And he wasn't going to stop testing them. The next morning, Elizabeth was getting ready to head out when I asked her where she was going. Oh, my friend isn't feeling great, so I'm going to run some errands with her boyfriend instead, she said like it was nothing. We need some supplies for the party, and he said he'd throw in a few extras from his shop. I froze. Wait. You're going alone with him? Yeah, what's the big deal? I felt my stomach tighten. Every instinct in me was screaming that this was a bad idea. But before I could say anything else, she was already walking out the door. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door, frustration bubbling up inside me. I wasn't trying to be controlling, but damn it, something about this situation felt wrong. I sat down, grabbed my phone, and mindlessly scrolled through messages. That's when I noticed the group chat with my buddies was blowing up. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who had concerns about this guy. One of my friends mentioned how he'd caught his wife texting him after the barbecue. Another said he'd noticed the guy getting a little too close with some of the women that night. It wasn't just me, everyone was seeing the same red flags. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. It wasn't about trust. I trusted Elizabeth. But I did not trust him. And I had a really bad feeling about what was coming next. That uneasy feeling stayed with me the entire day. I tried to push it aside, but every time I thought about Elizabeth being alone with that guy, something twisted in my gut. Hours passed. She hadn't texted, hadn't called. By the time evening rolled around, I was pacing the living room, debating whether to call her. Just as I reached for my phone, the front door swung open. Elizabeth walked in, arms full, carrying a massive box. And right behind her was him. I tensed immediately. He strolled in like he owned the place, that smug smile still plastered on his face as he helped set the box down. Got everything we need for the party, Elizabeth said, completely oblivious to the tension in the room. I barely heard her. My focus was locked on him, the way he glanced around my house like he was getting comfortable. Like he belonged here. Then he turned to me. All right, man. I'll catch you guys later. He walked out the door without waiting for a response. The second he was gone, I turned to Elizabeth. Close the door. She blinked, confused. What? Close the door. We need to talk. She sighed but did as I asked, crossing her arms as she faced me. What is it now? I didn't waste time. I don't want you talking to him anymore. Not unless your friend is there too. No texting, no calls, nothing. Her expression changed instantly. Excuse me. I kept my voice steady. I know you think I'm overreacting, but I'm not the only one. The guys at the barbecue saw the same thing I did. He's making moves on the women in our group. One of our friends even caught his wife texting with him. This isn't paranoia, Liz. It's a pattern. She scoffed. Oh, come on. So now I can't have any male friends? That's ridiculous. I shook my head. This isn't about friends. This is about him. He's not here because he cares about your friend. He's here because he's testing the waters. And you're letting him. Her face flushed. So now I'm the problem. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. No. But you're not seeing this for what it is. You think this guy is harmless. He's not. And I'm done pretending like I'm okay with it. I could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface. But I wasn't backing down. Finally, she let out a bitter laugh. "You're being ridiculous." I met her eyes. "Am I?" There was a long pause. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see it. But then, instead of acknowledging it, she just shook her head and walked away. I let her go, but my mind was made up. This guy was a problem. And I wasn't going to sit back and let him worm his way any closer to my wife. The day of the party arrived, and just my luck, I got called into work at the last minute. I wasn't happy about it, but there was no way around it. Before heading out, I shot a message to my buddies. "Keep an eye on that guy. Something about this still doesn't sit right with me." A few of them quickly responded, "Got it. Don't worry, we'll watch him." It wasn't ideal, but at least I had some backup. Work dragged on longer than expected. The entire time, I had this uneasy feeling in my gut, but I told myself I was probably overthinking things. Then, on my way home, I checked my phone and saw the messages. "Anyone seen Elizabeth? She's been missing for a while." That was enough to make my grip on the steering wheel tighten. Then another message popped up. "Her friend's boyfriend is missing too." A sinking feeling settled in my chest. I pressed harder on the gas, driving as fast as I could without getting pulled over. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the party was still going. Music, drinks, people laughing. But I didn't care about any of that. I walked inside, scanning the room. I called out Elizabeth's name. No answer. Then I spotted her friend in the kitchen. "Where's Elizabeth?" I asked, not bothering to hide my urgency. She hesitated. I don't know. She was here earlier, but..." Her expression shifted, and suddenly, she looked uneasy. I exhaled sharply. "And your boyfriend? Where is he?" She glanced around, her eyes widening as she realized he wasn't anywhere in sight either. That was all I needed to hear. I turned on my heel and started searching the house. Room by room. Nothing. Then I heard voices. Low. Urgent. I moved closer. Then I heard her. Elizabeth's voice. Uneasy. "No, he'll be back soon. He'll find out." That was it. I shoved the door open. And there they were. Elizabeth was sitting on the bed, her face flushed, looking completely caught off guard. And he was standing nearby, frozen in place, holding something in his hands. One of those absurd, oversized party favors they had picked up from his shop. The air in the room felt off. Like I had just walked into something I was never meant to see. For a long moment, no one moved. Then he quickly raised his hands like he was trying to defuse the situation. "Hey man, this isn't what it looks like." I didn't care what he had to say. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed him. The room erupted into chaos. Furniture scraped against the floor as he struggled, trying to back away, but I wasn't letting go. Elizabeth gasped, calling my name, her voice full of panic, but I barely registered it. The noise must have drawn attention because within moments, people were at the door. My friends stormed in, taking one look at the situation before stepping in. "Do you want us to take care of this?" one of them asked, his voice low and serious. I took a deep breath, my jaw locked tight. "Get him out of here." No one hesitated. They grabbed him, pulling him toward the door. He tried to protest, stumbling over his words, but no one was listening. Elizabeth was crying now, begging me to stop, but I still didn't look at her. She had already made her choice. And now, I was making mine. The moment they dragged him out of the house, I finally let out the breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The party was still going on, but people were starting to notice that something had happened. Some guests whispered among themselves, while others acted like they didn't want to get involved. Elizabeth was standing there, still shaken, still pleading with me to calm down. But I wasn't listening. I turned to her, my voice eerily steady. "I'm done." Her face paled. "What do you mean?" I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "I mean, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm divorcing you." She took a step forward, shaking her head. "No. No, we can fix this. Please, let's talk." I let out a hollow laugh. "Fix this? Liz, there's nothing left to fix." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a second, I could see the realization hit her. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She tried everything. She begged, she reasoned, she even got angry. She accused me of overreacting, of making something out of nothing. But nothing she said mattered. The trust was gone. The foundation of our marriage had crumbled. She kept pleading, but I had already made up my mind. I walked away, heading to the guest room. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, Elizabeth packed a bag and said she was going to stay with her mother. I didn't stop her. I didn't say anything at all. I just watched as she left, the door closing behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. I got in touch with a lawyer, filed the divorce papers, and started cutting ties. I didn't need a messy back and forth. I wanted it done. Meanwhile, her friend's ex-boyfriend, the one who had been thrown out of my house, didn't take things well. He started running his mouth, making threats. At first, I ignored him. Then he started calling Elizabeth's friend, harassing her too. I wasn't about to let that slide. I made sure he got the message. Stay away from me and my people. Shortly after that, karma did its job. His business, the one he had been so proud of, fell apart. Turns out, people don't trust a guy with a reputation like his. As for Elizabeth, she tried to reach out a few times, but I wasn't interested in talking. The papers were signed, and that was the only closure I needed. When everything was finalized, I sat alone in my house, taking it all in. This wasn't the life I had planned. But maybe, just maybe, it was the fresh start I didn't know I needed. Because at the end of the day, I chose myself. And I wasn't looking back. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.